Hello, everybody, and welcome and good afternoon. Thank you for joining another installment in our Revizto webinar series. I'm Greg Keller, Regional Sales Director with Revizto, and joining me today is our Canadian Territory Manager, Dan McKinnon. You started to hear some different voices over these past few webinars, and today is no different, as Dan will take the lead on this session and walk you through ways to leverage Revizto and gain value from a purely 2D perspective. We certainly focus on the 3D functionality and workflows in Revizto typically, but it's always good for our current and prospective customers to get an introduction or review into what sets us apart as a coordination platform, and that is combining 2D, 3D, and the integrated issue and communication tracker all into one centralized environment. It will be a bit of review for some of you folks, as I'm sure, but it's always good to kind of brush up on some things in Revizto. Dan will start out with a quick review of the different ways we can work with issues in Revizto, and then he'll get into the intelligent 2D sheets that are brought in natively and how to work with those. He'll talk about publishing sheets from Revizto into PDF and how you can filter issues to print on that particular sheet. He'll talk about bringing in sheet sets from AutoCAD and how those work. And he will also be talking about how to work with bringing in PDFs into Revizto and the difference there compared to the intelligent sheets brought in natively. This webinar, like all the rest of them, will be recorded and can be accessed afterwards on our YouTube channel or even by a request from a sales rep. So without any further delay, I'll introduce Dan McKinnon, our Canadian Territory Manager. Dan, take it away.
All right, thanks, Greg, and thanks everyone for joining me today. I appreciate it. I know here in Canada, some of our customers are across 6 different time zones, so good morning or good afternoon wherever you're at today, as well as those people from across the world. We are in 150 countries and counting with Revizto, so there's no telling where you could be from. So thanks for joining us. So as Greg said, the focus here today is on 2D coordination, and we recognize that there's a mandate for BIM to be delivered, but we also recognize that you've got contractual documents that have to be delivered in 2D, and that you're working with different team members, subcontractors, and trades that are working in 2D on a regular basis. And as a result, Revizto has some wonderful tools for being able to take advantage of that 2D in conjunction with the model in Revizto. So before we get started on 2D workflow in general, I think what I'd like to do is spend just a couple minutes for those of you who might be new to Revizto, so you have an understanding of really what our customers are using Revizto for. So right away, if you look at the top of the screen right now, you can see that Revizto is broken into 2D, 3D, and issue tracker. This really is the breakdown of the key elements that you use on a regular basis when you're using Revizto. So right now I'm in 2D. This slide that was created came in as a PDF, and we imported it into the Revizto model. So that's an example, and you'll see that as we move along here, how PDFs can be brought in, but they don't necessarily have to be sheets. They could just be related to the project. So we've got the sheet in right now. I'm going to click to 3D so we can get in the model itself. Let me get back to a view of the whole 3D model. So in Revizto, it's used as a real-time issue tracker and coordination platform, like Greg had mentioned. The key element that we see is in architectural engineering and construction space, there is that need to communicate between various players on a project. The need for real-time communication is key, but also the ability to get the BIM model, the 2D sheets, and the relevant communication to all members of the team, even those that are less proficient at working in the 3D model. Revizto does that a few different ways. So here I am right now in the general interface. I'm going to speak just quickly on that. As you can see, the user interface is designed to be very clean and elegant. This is the same user interface whether you're using Revizto on a desktop or if you're using it on a tablet device. It's designed to be single click, and the applications are applied that way. So you're able to learn how to use Revizto on one device and utilize it on all the devices the same way. The other aspect of using Revizto is that this model, in this particular case, came in from Revit. So the geometry and the object data came in from Revit. The 2D sheets came in from Revit, and in this particular case, we have issues that came in from clashes from Navisworks. But once we're inside of Revizto, we're able to view that and explore it with Revizto itself, whether we've got any of the applications that these models came from to begin with. and we're also able to explore it in virtual reality. So that's just a little bit about Revizto and how it works right now. I'm going to just touch on the issue tracker for a moment, and we'll get into that as we get into 2D markups. But every single issue that you create, you can create in 3D or 2D, and it's tracked in real time. And the issue has, this is where 2D has a real intelligence inside of Revizto. So I'm taking us to a markup that was marked up in 2D, or in 3D, I'm sorry. And we can see that this markup has a 3D element to it in the issue tracker. But additionally, if I go to 3D here on the left, I can explore the model in 3D to be able to verify this particular issue or explore it additionally. But here's the intelligence that's associated with the 2D. When I click 2D, this issue, when we marked it up, it was marked up in 3D, but Revizto is intelligent enough to know that this issue sits on an X, Y, and Z coordinate inside the model. And as a result, this issue, though marked up in 3D, appears on a 2D sheet. But if you look at this mini index, the little hamburger next to the 2D, when I click that, it showcases all of the 2D sheets that this particular issue comes into conflict with. So if I have someone working on a ventilation plan, they see this issue as well. Even though this issue was identified in 3D, Revizto recognizes that it belongs on all of the sheets on this level so that your coordination team are able to reference it as they are resolving their own issues. So this is a key part of how Revizto has all issues lie on the X, Y, and Z. So even though we're working in 2D here, there's an intelligence that goes back to the 3D of the model. So with that said, I'm going to jump back into 2D and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let me go to, I'm going to go to a sheet that gives us just a little more of the model here. All right, so here I am in a sheet right now, and I'm going to talk very briefly about what we're seeing on the screen right now. If you look down on the bottom part of the screen, you can see views according to pins, markups, and none. What we have right now is a view of the pins. And what that means is all the issues that impact this particular sheet, when I have pins on, it shows me them, whether they come in from 2D or 3D, or even in this case, we've got some that came in from clash detection in Navisworks. So each of these icons are representative of different types of issues that we have. If you see the plane, it's an issue that was identified in 2D. If you see a cube, it's an issue that's been identified in 3D. If you see these conflicting squares, this is an issue that came in from a Navisworks clash detection. These circles with the initials in them represent our new issue stamps, and we'll get into that as I show you how we create issues in 2D. But this gives us a chance to see all the issues, no matter how they were created, that would relate to this particular 2D sheet. Now, when I go to markups down here on the bottom and change my view, all it's showing me now are specific markups on this specific 2D sheet. So now what I'm seeing is just those markups that someone has gone through on this sheet and identified clearly. And I'm able to view those, I'm able to publish those. We'll get into that in just a moment. So, but what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click none. So we're just going to look at just this plain sheet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how it's different maybe from how you expect. When we bring a sheet in, and a number of these sheets, most of them came in from Revit. So I'm going to go over to Revit for a minute and talk a little bit about that so you understand how these come in. So when we install Revizto on a machine that has Revit or AutoCAD or Navisworks, we can opt to install the plugins as well. So you can see I've got a Revizto 4 tab here, and I've got a series of tools. In this case, these are tools specific to Revit. The tools are a little bit different depending on which application you're in, but they're mainly here to be able to move this data from the Revit model into the Revizto model. So when I export to Revizto, I have a number of options here, but what we're going to focus on is export sheets. This needs to be clicked if we want to get the intelligent 2D sheets in from Revit. When I click select, I can get very specific about what sheets I want to include. And additionally, one other thing I'd like to point out while I'm in here is there's a checkbox for use parallel sheet export. If you're using Revit, one of the last couple of releases, Autodesk improved their 2D sheet export process out of Revit. You can take advantage of those improvements by clicking that box here. So if you're using one of the last couple of releases of Revit, I recommend that you do that. One other thing I'm going to talk about exporting the model from Revit is that we have an export scheduler. So most of the firms that we work with have a regularly scheduled export of their model into Revizto. Again, you want to make sure these sheets are exported, and you can specify which ones you may or may not want to include here as well, if that's important to you. So just to point those things out in case you haven't been using 2D sheets as part of your workflow, that's how you push them out into Revizto. So let's get back into Revizto and let's talk about the sheet a little bit more. When we're working with 2D sheets, and I show you the sheet, the first assumption you might have if you're using a coordination application that's PDF based or 2D based is that this looks very similar to what you're looking at when you mark up sheets here. Well, as I showed you when I was showing you the issues, that all issues reside on X, Y, and Z, so they're automatically populated in the 3D space, so they know to be related to each of the particular sheets. So that's one intelligent factor that's different than working in PDFs. But additionally, all this intelligence related to the links from the model in Revit these sheets are all linked just like they are inside of Revit itself. Bear with me a minute. There we go. And I'm able to take myself to the link sheet from there. So any one of these links that are in here are intelligent links that we can take advantage of. Again, just like we could if we were working in Revit. But the thing I like to point out is there may be members of your team, perhaps a partner that isn't working with Revit, or site coordinators that are used to using PDFs or even printed sheets that aren't comfortable working in 3D. Well, now they've got the ability to jump from one link to another in this document and intelligently work their way through the project in a way they haven't had access to at all. And again, just as a reminder, this is something that comes in automatically from Revizto. Now, talking a little bit more about that 3D connection here, I'm going to jump up to the corner here where there's this jump to 3D button. When I click that, what I've done is I've just turned this into a live map. I can point to any particular area of this project, and I can click in that area and I can teleport to that space in 3D. So again, this is a really wonderful way for somebody who has a workflow that's built around 2D to make the jump to 3D and incorporate that in their workflow. So that's another element of how these 2D sheets are intelligent and relate back to the 3D model. Now, finally, one other thing I want to talk about here is this green icon in the bottom left-hand corner. In Revizto, every one of these sheets that come in from Revit, Revizto knows how to create an overlay of that sheet, and it will put this green icon on every one of these pages automatically. Again, I want to emphasize there's no setup required to do this. So once this is in and I click this icon here, what happens is Revizto intelligently takes this 2D sheet, overlays it over the 3D model, and puts it in its appropriate place so that now I can look at the 2D sheet for being able to do my markups. Here, let me turn off some of those issues that are clouding my view here. And I'm able to go in here and explore this and even change the scope box to explore, say, the stairway or some other 3D element that I want to explore. Again, this is a really wonderful way to be able to communicate the context of particular issues that are in 2D that you want to communicate back into the 3D. And it's as simple as clicking this icon. Now, one other final thing I'm going to do on this, just because we always get really good reactions to this, is that this particular detail is linked to the Revit model. So as a result, Revizto knows to create this overlay icon. When I click this icon, what it does, it takes that detail and positions it in place so that we can determine how we're going to construct this. So in Revizto, we have that ability to jump back and forth between our 2D and 3D intelligently. And we're able to explore it in a way that we probably can't from most other platforms. And we certainly are giving that ability to people who haven't had access to 3D otherwise to do that. So let's talk a little bit about marking up in 2D now. So we've had a lot of demos and a lot of webinars on the workflow of creating issues, but some things have changed recently. And Revizto 4.8 came out less than 4 weeks ago now. And with 4.8 came a very powerful new tool, which is our issue stamp. So I'm going to show you how the new issue stamp works. But before I do that, for those who haven't seen it before, I'm going to do our traditional issue creation. So if you go up to the top here, you see the little balloon with the plus sign on it. When I click on this, I'm able to create a marker. So this pin, what that does is that's going to dictate where the camera will show up for the 3D models. So I put it in the place of the area where I want to mark up something. And let's say I want to mark up this door right here. I'm going to do my markup here. And I can do a call out to that particular markup if I want. Markup. So my call out is in here now. I can type this up as a door issue. And what I'm doing right now is I'm doing a markup, much like you would maybe in any other markup software. But when I click done, what happens is it goes into our issue tracker. And this is where the power of Revizto is really leveraged. So right away, I've got this markup here, but you just saw me create this issue in 2D. When I go over here to 3D, Revizto knows that it's related to this door because of where the pin was. So I'm able to explore this in 3D even though I just marked it up in 2D, or even though my site coordinator might have marked it up in 2D, I'm able to explore it in 3D. And that's a powerful thing. I guess one of the things I kind of should show you here, because some of you may not have seen it before, is that when we have issues inside of Revizto itself, and it has a 3D location to it, I'm able to click that item and it will take me to that in my model itself. So Revizto has that ability to jump into an issue, and I'm going to try to take us into another issue that's 3D related here so I can show you something kind of cool. And when I double click it, it goes back to my authoring tool of choice. So whether I'm doing this in Revit or whether I'm in Navisworks or whatever I'm in, I'm able to jump back into my authoring software and see where that particular issue was. So getting back to this 2D sheet and the markup I just created, actually I'm going to go back into the issue tracker here, just jumped off there because I thought some people might want to see that. That particular issue I just created there, I have some parameters I can assign to it. And this is really important because this is how we can filter things in the issue tracker to find them, but also Revizto has a very comprehensive reporting system, both a real-time dashboard and a set and forget report system that we can coordinate any number of parameters to be able to send reports to members of our project team. So in here I can say, okay, well that door issue is a minor issue. I'm going to set a deadline on it. I'm going to set a deadline on Friday because I've got a coordination meeting on Tuesday. I'm going to assign this to Greg. Greg is part of Brett's team, and Brett said anytime I assign anything to Greg to assign Brett as well, so he can see what's going on with his team. Additionally, I can tag these specific items as well. So I said this is related to a coordination meeting, and perhaps it's related to these two firms, and it's a QA/QC issue. And that beep that just came on is Greg is also in this model right now, and here I am in the Niagara region of Ontario, and Greg is over in Eastern New York, and he just was able to get a notification immediately that something had been assigned to him, and he has now moved that status from open to in progress. So I immediately know that he's done that. So this markup, let's say this markup was done traditionally on a sheet that had to be brought back from the site, given to the designer, then transcribed into maybe they made the change in Revit right now, or maybe they had to actually copy and email this out to somebody. Inside of Revizto, this is all handled automatically through the issue tracking. So that's our traditional issue tracking process. But what I'm going to show you now is, oh, and Greg is already working on that. He's not going to let Brett look at him and think that that's not done. See, that's why I put Brett on these things to watch. So here we are, and up at the top is the ST for stamps. This is the new functionality I was just mentioning. When I click this, what happens is everything else is kind of moved out of the way so that it opens up this dialog for stamps here. And if I've got some door issues here, say related to some door repairs, I can go in here and mark this up by clicking and putting it in place. And all the parameters that are on this particular project can be pre-configured. So if you've got issues that you have on a regular basis that you know, hey, this is going to be assigned to Greg and Brett needs to watch these things, I can have these things built right into my stamps. And once I have a stamp in place, I also have the ability to put this in multiple places at one time. So say, for instance, I've got door repairs here as well. I can click the door, I can hold my control button, and I can click here, and I can click here, and I've just added these stamps. And in each case, these parameters are automatically filled in for us.
And Dan, I just wanted to hop in real quick and just kind of mention that, you know, when we came up with this stamping functionality, it was originally meant to, you know, it was geared towards mainly the field coordination and punch listing. But what we quickly realized was that due to the ability to automate this entire issue creation process, is that it really obviously doesn't have to be limited to, you know, punch listing or field coordination. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of our design customers are actually leveraging these stamps, creating all kinds of different issues that are common, during design review and coordination, and they're leveraging those stamps both in 2D and 3D. And then, like I said, it automates that, just like Dan said, as all those parameters on the right-hand side are already pre-configured. So just wanted to point out that it doesn't have to be used for just field coordination and punch listing.
And that's a good point, Greg. Thanks. And I think one other thing to kind of touch on with stamps finally before I move on is that the stamps by their type and by their initials are all searchable functions inside of our issue tracker and our reporting. So this can eliminate in a lot of cases the need to tag and to set up some of these parameters, because you'll be able to search by that criteria inside of the project as well. So that's all I'm going to really cover regarding creating markups inside of 2D. But what I'm going to visit right now is I'm going to get out of the stamp mode, and I'm going to go back into this drawing, which I'm already in, and I'm going to talk a little bit about publishing to PDF, because this is such an important part of the project. So if I've got a bunch of markups here, and I've got a trader or a subcontractor who hasn't been invited to my Revizto project, maybe they're just in and out for one particular item, and I'm getting some markups over to them for them to address. I can go down here again. Keep in mind views. And one of the things I'll touch on views right now is that green icon associated with being able to use the overlay. That's only available in pins. So if you're in markups and you're going, hey, I want to do an overlay, and you don't see it, it's just because it's in pins. I only point that out because I didn't realize it one day and got lost in it. So just to share from my pain. So here I am in the markups right now. And let's say I want to publish these to PDF. Well, two updates ago, we added PDF publishing to Revizto. So we recognize that 2D is a big part of the contract process in the AEC space. We recognize that this is the way that things are commonly shared, and we want to give you that capability inside of Revizto. So when I go up here, I can choose to export to PDF. I can send this sheet with absolutely none of the markups on it if I want. I can do it based on what's currently filtered, or I can do it based on presets. And I'll talk about presets in a second, just so you have a context on this. But basically what I can do is I can choose any one of these things. I say, okay, I can send this out as a PDF. It's sent out as fast as that. I'll open it back up for you so you can actually see the PDF itself. And that PDF that I just created was sent out as quickly as that. As you can see, all of the stamps related to this particular 2D sheet, as well as the markups, are on here. But I can go into the filters, and I can take the stamps out, for instance, if that's all I wanted to focus on. And I mentioned the ability to filter. This is all through our issue tracker itself. And here are all my issues. When I go to this filter up in the left, I can come across here and I can do a custom filter to look by any of those parameters we talked about before. Can be searched. And then once I have what I'm looking for, I can save as a preset. You'll see on this project, I already have a number of presets. So I've got my 2D issues are selected now, or my clash issues that came in from Navisworks. We already have pre-configured this. And if the 3 circles are next to it, this is my ability to share this pre-configured filter out to all of my teammates so that they can use them for commonly searched for criteria. So I'm going to go back in here and reset the filters and get back to where we are. One other thing I'll point out here is that you'll see that when there's a 2D markup on here, that it is presented in full resolution, whereas the transparency on the other ones are turned down. So you've got the slider down on the bottom that you can use to turn that up or down. It just helps you if you have to identify a specific issue that you want to look at, but gives you the context of the other 2D markups that you have on the project. So that's a little bit about publishing a PDF, and a little bonus here on the filters so that you understand how to use those, because that's a pretty new functionality. So I'm going to jump back over to 2D for a minute, and I'm going to talk to you about bringing in other documents. So what I've done here, I am just jumping 2 things and not talking to you where I'm going here. That I'm into the 2D drawings, and all of these drawings here are all the ones that came in from Revit. But I've got a couple of folders here, one for PDFs and one for DWGs, where I brought in native 2D drawings into the project itself. So let me show you how that works. Once I'm into the sheets, I can go up here to this particular button where it says import file. I click that. I can choose a particular file. and I can open it up and bring it into my model itself. So it's as simple as clicking there and bringing it in. Once I bring it in, I do have the ability to create folders in here, and I do have the ability to move things around. So I've got the ability to manage a project that can get kind of out of whack pretty fast by not having it structured. I can add some structure by putting this in. Once I bring the PDFs in, the PDFs come in. Here is a level 1 lighting plan from PDF. And one of the things you'll see when I click on this is there are no pins that are appearing. This is just a 2D sheet that has no connection to the 3D model. But I'm going to show you another PDF that I have here. I'm going to open this one up, and this one has all the pins associated with the issues on each of these particular areas. So let me show you how I did that. So with this PDF here, I'm going to create an overlay. So what I'm going to do is I go up here to the right-hand side where it says Set up 3D Overlay, and then I get this box that I'm going to go to the edges of the perimeter of this building. I'm going to walk it down here pretty close to it. That's close enough. This won't be perfect because I'm doing this in front of you all. So we'll, let me pull back. Actually, I'm going to go back to here a minute, get my bearings. So I am going to now create, sorry about that, lost my scope box handle here. Shouldn't have done that. Bear with me. I'm going to cancel this and start all over so that we can show you that it's not as painful as Dan is making it out to be. It's only painful when I'm doing it in front of a group of people. So that's just so that you all know. It worked perfect all the other times, sure. All right, so here I am in my, oh, look at that. All right, so I am, so I've got the scope box, and what I'm trying to do, the goal of what I'm trying to do here while I'm fidgeting around and looking like I'm having some sort of a fit in front of you all is I'm actually trying to position this close to what the 2D looks like. So I've got it so that I should be able to put that footprint sort of on there now. So now what happens is that overlay comes into place, and I have a couple of anchor points. Now these anchor points are movable. They don't have to stay where they are, and I don't like them where they are, so I'm going to move them. So I hit my control, and I can move this down to this corner here where I've got a point that'll be easier to identify. And I'm going to hit my control and move that one up to that point there, which I think is the other point I want to match. And once I let go of the control, they're yellow again, and I can put them into the rough position of where I want them to go. All right, now I'm going to scroll in a little bit and take this point that I have here and line it up. And I'm going to run over here to the other side and do the same thing here. All right, and that's close enough to give you the idea. I'm going to say done now. And then as soon as I did that, this overlay now from the PDF comes in, and Revizto knows all of these issues that lie in the X, Y, and Z, and which one of them belong in this particular level. So now this intelligence has been added to the project, including the ability to click the overlay and view this, just like the other 2D sheets that came in from Revit as well. So this is a very powerful tool, and you're not going to necessarily want to do this with every one of your 2D sheets that you import in, but if you've got particular areas that you want to be coordinating with the rest of your team in, this is an intelligent way to do it. And when I bring another, let's say the sheet gets updated, if I import it and it has the same name, it'll come right back into the same place. It'll replace this PDF into the same place. So that's the PDF workflow and creating overlays to interact with the 3D model. So from there, I'm going to talk a little bit about AutoCAD, and then that's going to get us, I think, to the end. So here we are in AutoCAD. I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools to export to AutoCAD. Now, here's a caveat and something that's important to recognize, that when you bring projects in from AutoCAD, Revizto will take it from the sheet set. So you need to have a sheet set activated to bring it in directly as DWGs. If sheet sets aren't part of your workflow, then I would recommend going back to the process I use for PDFs, publishing the PDFs and sending your sheets in that way. But if you do use work sets in AutoCAD, you can use the plugin here to export to Revizto. And then you get a dialog box. You can choose the specific sheets that you want to bring in, and then you can send those into your Revizto project from there. So with that said, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to show you what that looks like once I bring it in here. So again, I push those in from AutoCAD, and once they came in from AutoCAD, here is what the AutoCAD looks like inside of our Revizto model. And that overlay process I just did with the PDFs, I did that with one of the sheets here from AutoCAD as well. And as soon as I did that overlay process, we were able to add that intelligence, that understanding of where the sheet belongs to the X, Y, and Z of the model itself. So that's where that was able to coordinate from there. So I think that, Greg, that's where I wanted to go with this today. Generally, the purpose of this particular session was to speak to those firms that we are working with that have to contend with their 2D sheets coming in and project sheets coming in from 2D. And now you can see with Revizto, there's a number of ways to be able to incorporate that into your BIM project and be able to coordinate with your entire team in real time. And that's it for me. Greg, anything you'd like to add?
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you going through this today, and I think it was quite informative for everybody on here. That concludes today's session. If anybody has any additional questions, please send an email to Dan or myself, which I'll let Dan go back to the PDF that he dropped in there as an intro slide. So again, please send an email to Dan or myself with any questions about this webinar or anything else pertaining to Revizto, and we'd be glad to help out. So that concludes today's session. Thanks everybody for coming out. Have a great day.